Hi, everybody, and welcome back to your show. And you're very welcome to this next panel session and asset management. And I'd like to hand you over to Anand Mecheri, who will start us off with a 10-minute presentation. Thanks, Anand. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, ArcDoc staff, for organizing this session. Delighted to be presenting to you all. Next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about digital twins and how it is critical to drive transformation in the post-construction asset management world. I'm Anand Mecheri. I'm the CEO of Invicara. By way of brief introduction, Invicara is the developer of twinit.io. It's a platform that we and our partners utilize to create highly customized digital twin solutions for the built environment. I'm going to dive right in and talk about what's the bridge between BIM and digital twins and start the conversation from there. So before that, quickly, what is a digital twin? There's always this question that comes up when we have conversations. Is BIM a digital twin? Is digital twin something else? Let me use a few statements from the Digital Twin Consortium to explain the differences. Firstly, a digital twin is a virtual representation, and I think everyone agrees it's a virtual representation of a real-world entity or a process. But the important piece is that the twin is synchronized with the physical entity, the real-world entity, at a certain frequency and detail or fidelity. And that's really important to keep in mind. The second part is that the digital twin concept is very much driven by use cases, very much driven by outcomes. So you can't say, here is a product, here's a digital twin that does 20 things. No, we've got to be very deliberate about defining what a digital twin is, define the use cases, leverage the data to drive those use cases, and apply them in a platform, an IT, OT platform, to drive those outcomes into success. And when we do implement a digital twin, obviously you get the transparency, the visibility to the performance of the business, of the asset, which drives improved outcomes for the asset owner in our case. So that's a high-level view of what a digital twin is. Now, talking about BIM and how it translates into digital twins, the first step is we talked about defining use cases. Now, whether it's for delivering a good outcome from the BIM process or to deliver a digital twin in the end, definition of the use cases is going to be vital. And once you have done that, then comes the stage where all the information managers are going to be focused on during the development phase of the project, which is about defining and managing the BIM data workflows, making sure the models are classified. What is classification? It's a way of ensuring that machines can understand models in the way that it's supposed to be understood. So classifying models, making sure that the models, the required parameters are defined, making sure that data is gathered, making sure that data is validated. It's not just the data in the models, it may also be relating to documents. Now, all of that is in the wheelhouse of all of us as information managers, right? So that's the piece that contributes very heavily to the success of a digital twin. Once you have done that, we can then extract and transform the graphics and the data and the documents into a digital twin platform that then allows us to extend the data model and start connecting it with data sets that's outside the realm of BIM. It could be BMS, IoT systems, enterprise applications. So you start bringing the real-time data sets into the twin, and that starts making the twin data set more complete. When we have done that, it then, from a digital twin point of view, it's vital to start expressing these data sets as knowledge graphs. A knowledge graph is like how a social media platform knows everything about everybody. It knows who you are you connected with, when did you go to which restaurant, at what point in time. It knows everything. Likewise, a digital twin needs to have context to what is what in an asset, all the relationships between those entities and the data relating to that. And when we have that, we are then able to build analytics and dashboards to be able to drive the outcomes that we are targeting to achieve. And the last step then is, once you've got the data, once you've organized the data, you're then able to compose role-based user interfaces, build integrations into applications to create the outcome. So a digital twin is founded on good BIM, on good information management. Because if you don't have that in place, everything else is going to be garbage. You can put get a lot of good data, build a lot of good integrations, but if it's going to be built on top of bad data, it's not going to be successful. So BIM and information management is vital for this post-occupancy strategy based on digital twins. I'm going to take an example of, just to illustrate this a little bit further, in another context. Let's take the example of maps, okay? So if you look at this map, this is a map that something like equated to the architectural model in BIM, right? So you have the base layer, you have the information about what is where. It needs everything in this map needs to be classified. It should be selectable, searchable by a machine, by different applications. And then you add more information to it, like the structural model. You add more information about, in this case, the topography, and then you add more information, maybe like how you bring the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems together. So when you bring it all together, you have a set of maps. What you still have is not a digital twin. It's a set of maps, but searchable, organized, object-oriented information. When we put this in the hands of you and me, and we use it to navigate ourselves, we then start producing information. And that information combines back with the maps to create the digital twin. Now we can see that there is traffic on the roads and which roads are congested, which roads are free. And then you start bringing information about hotels, locations and reservation systems, the real-time prices that the hotels are publishing. It could be about transportation. How do I get from A to B? Do I take public transport or do I use a taxi? Okay, I need to get from my home to the city in Dublin, and it's going to cost me 40 euros by Uber, or I can take the public transport at 3 euros, and it's going to be just 7 minutes more. So I pick the public transport. So we can see that the digital twin is now becoming a decision support system, right? But you need the base layers, you need the base data. You put that in the hands of people, they start using it, they produce new information, and when you bring that data together, you get that cognitive picture of or capability to drive decisions. Same idea. Digital twins are exactly, for the built environment, is exactly the same. Now, coming back to BIM and really how do we deliver a twin? As we talked about, we start with strategy and planning. We define the use cases. Once we have the use cases, we establish the information requirements. Once we have the requirements, we run through the information management process where we are able to, where we must classify the models, where we must validate the data in those models. And once that is done, you start having a good foundation to create what I would call an asset twin. An asset twin is a digital manual of your facility. As you develop go through the construction process, commissioning process, there's information coming in from the field. There is handover documents. You're then able to compose how the systems are deployed, how they serve different spaces, and all of that together becomes the digital handover to the client. As an asset twin, it's an excellent way to deal with adding value to the BIM process, delivering something to the asset owner to operate the facility. And then you can integrate the real-time information. So the performance twin is a step beyond an asset twin. An asset twin, while it's a digital manual of facility, a performance twin starts giving you, just like with maps, how it starts giving you information about the traffic and the roads and the hotels and all the other information, the occupancy of different places. Likewise, a performance twin starts giving us the real-time performance data, drives analytics, drives anomaly detection, drives all of the outcomes that you need to operate assets effectively, which then lends itself to a number of use cases or applications that are driven by it. So a digital twin is a process. It's not a product. It's a set of tools, a set of solutions that you create, but it's founded on data. It's founded on good information management during the design development process of an asset. So in summary, we have to seize the opportunity today. I mean, as practitioners in the industry today, we can make sure that every single development, every new development can be delivered as a digital twin, at least as an asset twin, to add value to the BIM process and create value for the asset owner. It needs to be conceived early, so it's not an afterthought. The earlier we start working on a digital twin strategy, the better outcomes we get. Handover is the last opportunity for contractors to end a project and create a great impression with the clients. And digital twins are a great way to get that done and get projects signed off and closed out. And lastly, but not the least, let's keep in mind that to meet the Paris Climate Agreement goals, buildings have to decarbonize 100% by 2050, 80% by 2030. So which means digital twins are going to be vital to help achieve that outcome. So information management, driving a BIM process with data is vital to all of these outcomes. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. That was great. So now we'll hand over to Graham Stewart from Digital Gorilla. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen and hear me loud and clear? Awesome, excellent. Let's get started. So the Client Information Manager. So my name's Graham Stewart. I'm a Digital Director at Digital Gorilla. Again, contact details, and I know Ralph's been sharing the website quite a few times, so please feel free to reach out and contact me after the presentation. So what is an information manager? So looking at the client, employer, pointing party, there's lots of different terminology these days. Again, it helps clients define their overall strategic requirements, and obviously important to understand what the possible benefits are. Discuss with the client's asset management team to find out what exactly they need. It can also assist in development of the AIR and also possibly the EIR, depending on what time they're actually appointed. More importantly, they're actually validate and also police the task team to make sure what they're actually delivering is actually fit for purpose and actually are to the agreed documented processes as well. Now, again, information management has been about for a while. Again, this is straight out of the CIC scope of services for information management. It's been about since 2013, so again, it's nothing new. But again, with obviously the introduction of the ISO 19650, it's actually brought information management to the forefront, what we're actually talking about today. And again, there is a lot of key things, even from, again, we've always used this for a decade now, but things like now establishing, agreeing, implement the information structure, to liaise and cooperate with the project team to support this whole collaborative working culture, right through to assisting project team members and assembling information for project outputs. So there is a lot of merit for why we actually have information managers as part of the key team member as well. So start to end flow structured information. Again, we have all the client requirements. Again, as you know, these are not always in place, but again, we do strive to get these as much as possible. And again, this is where client almost like now education and support comes in to make sure they have all these key documents in place. Once that's done, then also the design team kick in, start to develop the execution plan, all the 3D models, documents and drawings, and then finally the asset information model at key stages. Contractor comes on board to update it for all the as-built information, which is finally then transferred to the almost like the CAF-FM or the facilities asset management system. But for me, information management is almost like the glue that actually brings it all together. And that's where I think we actually bring the real value here to make sure all the working parts are actually running as smoothly as possible. But again, what is the UK BIM framework demanding? Again, nothing new. We've actually been trying to do this for over a decade now. Again, if you look back at PAS 11.2 Part 2, came out in 2012. This was actually part of the BIM Level 2 mandate again. Geometric information, non-geometric structured using COBE, and then open data formats using the PDF. So again, it's nothing new. So again, even in the decade, we are still struggling to get most people to deliver these three things that we've actually been looking for since 2012. So again, what would the clients need to get involved in? Well, again, coming up with their AIRs, now their asset naming strategy, and listing what all maintainable assets are, and providing asset data templates. It's very similar with the room and name strategies to find out from the architect what actually rooms they are. And then information management is actually then helped to actually structure all that information using like Uniclass and IFC. And again, we can always look at that as our national classification standard codes and our open BIM mapping from our native software, whereas as you know, interoperability can be a massive issue just now. But again, what we're actually trying to achieve, again, we're building native models, we're exporting IFC, we're exporting all our deliverables, our drawings, our data, and that's all been structured using COBE and BS 11.2 Part 4. And then finally, now getting exported to the CAF-FM system or handover as our AIM. So again, this is all something that's been a legacy from BIM Level 2, the ISO 19650s, but got a big focus on there with this whole thing of information management. So again, that's almost like a background information management. So again, I thought it'd be good to show you some of the things we're actually doing in Scotland for where I am. this thing called a standard information management plan, where we're actually trying to assist public clients. The Standard Information Management Plan, again, it was set up in 2019 as part of the Scottish Government's £1 billion schools programme, which is also part of the £2 billion, which is called now investment programme. It's all about sustainabilities. You see some of the key things here. There's a dashboard, which is high-level strategy of what the client's trying to achieve. We have a workbook with various appendices, which you can actually see on the screen. And I've highlighted and read some of the key ones we'll go over just now. This is what, and there's various templates. This is basically trying to come up with a standard structured framework that clients can actually follow. But again, very much part of the Scottish Government's funding is to actually make sure the clients actually have a client information manager on board to actually help them drive the strategy so they know exactly what they're getting, and also police and validate what the design team is delivering as well. So just looking at the main workbook, again, you can see some of the key sections here. Again, very similar to a normal EIR, but again, instead of an EIR being 50 or 60 pages, it's under 20 pages, and it's all done in spreadsheet format, which can easily be transferred into a database if that's something you actually wish to do, which I know UK BIM Alliance have actually shown some good examples of. But again, project information standards, project information procedures, right through to our information management assignment matrix. You can see there some of the extracts looking at various software exports as well. But just looking at some of the key areas, PIRs. So again, this is something that we're keen to actually drive with clients to make sure they actually fully understand what is the thought process they have to get through to make sure that when delivery teams send their information for their key end of stage deliverables, the clients know exactly what they're looking for and what questions they're actually trying to address as well. And again, for your information, we actually developed quite a list for the MBS's BIM toolkit, because it actually has over 300 plain language questions or PIRs actually built into it. So again, it's a good source of information you can actually use straight away. Next, about the asset information requirements. A2, it's basically all structured against NRM, although we are moving that to product codes for NBS Uniclass, and again you can see it's already structured to Uniclass 2015 system codes as well. But again, we're looking at things here like now, is it a maintainable asset? Do we have periodical conditional surveys, statutory compliance, plan preventive maintenance? So again, all that sort of good stuff, and what assets do actually these are aligned to. So actually try to draw it down to what actually are we looking for here. And then looking at COBE as well, again, so we're basically just taking the COBE responsibility matrix and just making sure everybody knows exactly what data they're delivering at each stage of the project as well. So nothing really new here. Some of the templates, T2, which is basically looking at the overall container hierarchy. Again, there's been a lot of discussion about today, but again, this is mostly all structured around Uniclass 2015 PM codes. So again, the reason for doing this, like clients don't have to go and search for a drawing, they can just search our PM code 4040 and that'll bring out our design drawings, providing it's actually been structured correctly. T4, which is basically structuring and mapping data to the client's FM system. So in this case, we're looking at Technology Forge, which a lot of councils in Scotland use as part of their asset management system. Again, the example I've got here, there was over 100 assets with over 900 parameters mapped to the client's CAF FM system. So again, it's all about structured approach. And then finally, T5, which is the asset register, which is finally what the contractor will actually have to deliver. So again, absorbing some of the information we'll actually be getting from COBE, and then finally looking at how to operate, how to maintain, and health and safety compliance as well. So again, asset managers go through specifying exactly what it is they need from the contractor at handover as part of the O&M and asset management system. So again, the whole point is to provide consistent approach to delivering asset data and O&M across all funded projects in Scotland, which a lot of the public clients are now actually starting to look to adopt as a standard, even if they aren't getting funded from the Scottish Government. So again, the whole point of this is
2 minutes, Graham. Thank you.
Yep. The whole point of this is basically supporting clients by providing a structured approach to information management. So again, structured training, standardized setup, so all the mapping and all the coding is all there from whatever native software package you're actually using. In the example here, we've got Revit to provide in-depth analysis and validation so that the delivery teams know where they're failing, but also clients know what needs to be addressed before they actually get to handover as well. And this is done at each stage of the project as well. Again, finally, just recap what we're trying to achieve by having all these systems in place. Then hopefully we can make it a lot easier for design teams to deliver exactly what it is the client's looking for at each stage of the project and also a final handover as well. And that's me bang on target. Awesome, thanks.
Fabulous. Thank you, Graham. That's great. So finally, now I'd like to hand over to Pierre Venter from Integrated Facility Solutions, or IFS.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pierre Venter. I'm with Integrated Facility Solutions. We're an asset management company, been around for 20 odd years. And I'm an architect by profession. And this is a new era for me. Typically, we've gone into the design, ended up going to construction, and from construction, that was the end of it. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks very much, client, and move on. What's really changed for me is that digitally, the world has become much smaller, much more inclusive. And we do have many divides, but the communication improves absolutely everything. And I think that's probably the key issue about data, is that it permits communication, not just the technology. Something that I gleaned from this, just an analogy, is of course, data has relationships, people have relationships, and information links both of them. And then a little quote that I really do like, and that's sharing is caring. So, question that we've really got is that I come from an older era where we used to have paper drafting. And at the bottom of there, we have the work stages. But it's important, I've taken this and bastardized it a bit from Rebo, is that from work stage 0 to 6, the standard construction process, and then lengthened what is actually 7, the in use, when the assets are typically going to be managed, maintained. So the question is, how do we change and influence the change? So currently with my new role at IFS as a BIM lead, I've suddenly found that asset management is sometimes an orphan child. And I'll qualify that. It's pretty much similar to something like Kobe, is that it's something that gets left to the end. And when that happens, we do understand that we've lost the ability to influence the change, but we've also got the potential for the costs to rise. So one of the things that I've learned in the engagement, and this is really an important part, is that data contribution needs to be by all the stakeholders. So typically in projects, what are we really looking at? Are we looking at the data, or are we looking at people who manage that data? So as the information manager, the two of them come together. And we're really benefited in the UK because of mandated standards and formal processes. The mandated standards draw things across and start getting processes applied. So the one question is, should processes and standards be drawn on by demand or through engagement? And in both cases, I support both of them in my activities. In preparation for this presentation, I looked at a thought, and you can see here that we've got a timeline. Essentially, we start on the left-hand side at the beginning of a project. We go through to the end of the construction stage, and then we have an in-use. And I just happen to be, I live in London near the Thames River. And one of the most amazing parts is that the assembly of a project is on a whole series of individual parties, appointed parties, lead appointed party. We engage with a number of activities, and out of those activities, we generate data. So what I've done is, on the left here, we have the client. The client is the most important party in terms of data because they set the benchmark. They define what assets they need to record data on. The next important part is that each and every one of the entities, architects, engineers, the professional team, consultants, the local bodies, all interact. But typically, we've had a very linear process. And what we haven't done is we haven't shared data. So the analogy that came out when I was looking at some water puddles the other day with rain is that there's a series of concentric rings which radiate out. And if we share and make data available, we, one, have managed the data, we share it, but the benefit accrues to somebody else who can use that to formulate data. Now, how does that impact on assets? Well, we start off with a good intention. We have various links and connections. We have a CDE. We use the digital technologies to advance our capabilities. And what we do need to do is actually raise people's awareness of what data, what reliability it has, how it's visualized, how it's materialized, and what it does when it gets put together. And all of that goes into the construction process where we assemble, we have governance. And then when we start talking about governance, all of a sudden, you'll see that there's a yellow line which runs from the left-hand side through the model through to the end. And with apologies to Anand, it's a golden thread without being a golden thread, so I'm probably abusing the title. But it is a case of connecting all of the pieces of data that have relevance to a person, a party, a body that is an owner, and then the other people are consumers. Now, with apologies, but the technology that starts to glue some of these is a technology like GS1, VR, AR, the need for sustainability. So hence, when we start the project, we could be reusing information, documents, and components, and going through carbon dioxide treatments, social changes, all the way through to the construction phase, and then thereon after that, where we get to the recycle stage. So basically what I've gone through to experience now is, as an asset management solution company, we're now looking at the things like the golden thread and the accountability, sourcing raw material, processing it, getting it to suppliers. And at the bottom, we have a container, which is the sustainability part. Now, as we go through the linear process, because it's an incremental process, the manufacturer steps in, taking the raw materials to process the supplies, and he manufactures, assembles, and into that he then is required to now put data, health and safety data, the added values about the product itself, how it's going to perform. That now aggregates to the sustainability. As we move into the design stage, we now take the architect, the structural engineers, the MEP, design and technical components, and consultants for various different capabilities, and they add the values of design performance for which the building is going to be measured later. Equally, they generate and provide analysis. Finally, we move into the construction and the construction process. Now, if we put this all together, this might be 2, 3, 4 years. And then at the end, we come to the construction completion and we do the handover. Now, all of this work that we've done up to this point, the data has been populated and there are periods of governance in between, mandated in terms of the standards. But what it does is it's actually a set of checks and balances. And what it does is it is engaging with everybody there. Now, that's part of the exercise.
2 minutes,
to get people.
Pierre, thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, we move into the assets, the FM, IWMS, CAFM systems. And this is basically what we're at. 15% typically for the design and construction phase, and 85% of the project lifetime is spent in asset management. And I've used this here that the owner developer is at the top and follows a lifeline right the way through to the recycling, and that could change. But we go through with a new facility, and then we have various nodes that could be included for which data will now be incredibly valuable and is managed within the asset system through maintenance, repurposing of a building, new technologies, tenants, and finally getting to when the building is scrapped and recycled. So we could start with reuse from one side and move right the way through to recycling. Principally, that gives you the kind of journey that I'm taking of an architect with interest in data and arriving in this 85% and seeing how important it really is in a project lifetime. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's jump straight in with some questions for the panel. And the first question I have is the current setup in the industry, do they have the right people or the wrong people producing data and providing data? For example, architects are producing generic data, which will ultimately take that one first. Maybe you, Pierre?
Yes, I do believe one of the problems that we have right now is people need to take ownership. And as an architect, I believe architects actually have a very important role. We start with a room data sheet and performance criteria, and we need to pass that on because that has a knock-on on the entire team, MEP, etc. So yes, we need to draw people in and expose them to the data they could be handling.
Yeah, I'll jump on that as well. Yeah, we work with a lot of clients, especially most people are still focused on delivering drawings. Whereas I always try to explain to a client, look at a drawing, it'll be 100% technically correct, or it should be, but when you actually scratch the surface and look behind the drawing, then the data's all over the place and might not necessarily be in the right place. And that's where we have to get, we have to make sure people who are delivering drawings and delivering data are both in a consistent manner. So we will work with quite a lot of clients where we'll actually sit in the background to make sure these things are actually getting done. But again, providing training support is a key thing for that. But I think the most difficult thing is everyone is still busy, focused, trying to get drawings out on a Friday night for projects, and they don't actually have enough time to actually do what you could term model management and actually make sure the model's properly built, properly created, properly structured, so you can actually get the data in a consistent manner. And that whole shift has to change. And you can almost think about this as the data time bomb is coming for the next decade. If directors and company owners don't realize this, it's a massive risk to their business, because in 10 years' time, a client could come back and go, the data you provided 10 years ago is, quite frank, rubbish, is crap. Go away and fix it. And that could potentially cost tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands, or even millions to fix, depending on the size of the project. So it's a massive risk.
I would put a context to that question a little bit. So if it's information that an architect needs to provide for supporting design processes, clearly the architect is responsible to produce whatever they need to produce. But if it's about handover to the client and operations, it's very possible that some of the information that today an architect is expected to produce is probably redundant, because some of that information may get actually changed when a contractor is on board and when they produce the as-builts. So it all depends on the context of the information, and if it's a handover information, then whoever is crafting the asset information requirement and defining the scope of the data deliverables need to consider, is that data produced, is the responsibility right in terms of that deliverable? Because there's no point producing information which is redundant and replaced later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd just like to remind the audience that there was a poll that was sent out, and if you'd like to receive a CPD certificate, then you need to complete that poll. So it's just in the chat, and that is exactly the place where you can put your questions also. So moving on, let me just pull up the next question here. And you answered this, but it might be worth verbalizing this for everybody. I mean, there was a question just as you started talking around, do you think a digital twin has to include a graphical model representation?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there is really no reason why a digital twin must have a 3D representation of an asset, right? It's not a must-have. There are a number of use cases that can be served extremely well with just data represented in a data model or a knowledge graph that brings context to the information and drives those use cases. So 3D representation is not a must. However, when you do have a 3D representation, there are certain use cases that come to life in ways that it does not without those 3D representations. So I would say where it's possible to leverage a 3D model as part of a digital twin is extremely valuable, but it is certainly not a must. A number of use cases can be served without. Again, goes back to the question, what are the use cases you're trying to solve?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Another question here around handing over from design to construction stage. When a design model is handed over to the contractor, is it now the contractor's responsibility to complete the asset information that should be completed during design stage? And Graham, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, I think contractors need to get better at validating design information, because again, it's risk. If they just take on a design model without actually going through proper validation to make sure all the placeholder information, let's be honest here, the design model is a design intent, it's a placeholder model, which the contractor will then update with what's actually been built on site. And quite a lot of times that will be rebuilding models through the fabrication, or maybe employing the design team, novating them over to update the models to depend on what's actually been done on site as well. So yeah, contractors will ultimately be responsible for all data, because again, that's they're installing it. So they've got to be responsible for all of it, and their own manuals. So they have to go through the proper due diligence and validation to make sure the design teams have delivered it all. And but I've seen that in quite a few projects where more and more contractors are actually doing that now. So they're not just naively taking on models. They are now going through and spending a lot of time. Design team might say, yeah, it's a class 3 model, the Kobe's 100%, and the contractors come back and go, well, what's these 6,000 clashes still in the model, and why is your Kobe responsibility, basically, or why is your Kobe QC reporter only at 43%? So again, I think design teams have, again, it's all part of risk. I think they've got to really step up now and take ownership that they actually have an important. It's no longer acceptable to say the contractor will take care of this. Design teams have got to do a lot of information, so the contractor can effectively just take that information and then just effectively add on what's been installed, now installation date and warranty information. That's really it. If a bit of kit changes, then of course the contractor would update that. But if everything's as per the design model, it will basically be basic information that will be installed by the contractor.
Okay, thank you. And Anand, we've opened a can of worms with the 3D models. So Darwin is saying you can build a digital twin without 3D models. How do digital twins represent the physical assets without the 3D BIM model graphical?
Sorry, you broke up there, Claire. Can you repeat that question?
Oh, yeah, apologies. So how do digital twins represent the physical assets digitally without 3D BIM model graphical representation?
Sure, yeah. So if the use cases that we are trying to address include locating assets and locating systems that they are part of, and locating the spaces those systems serve, and highlighting them in the 3D model, or doing heat maps, all of those use cases do require a 3D model. There's no way you can do a digital twin with these use cases without a 3D model. However, there are use cases that you can address relating to how a particular plant is performing, and you're gathering data about the experience of the people within a space in terms of the air quality, and you're running analytics on it, and you're doing optimization algorithms. So there are use cases that you can address that is not dependent on 3D visualization, but there are clearly the examples that you stated there do require a 3D model. So back to the same point, what are our use cases? What data sources do we need to address those use cases? And if it is a use case that needs visualization, yeah, absolutely, you do need it.
Okay, thank you. And Pierre, so you spoke a lot about data and sharing and availability of data. So how can we influence change? You know, what do you see as the change maker here to make these changes right through to the in-use phase of a building?
I think that the first part is talking about ownership and raising an understanding of what that data is and how it impacts on other people. So it's understanding the value to yourself, but also to the other members of the project team and the contractor. And as I said earlier, the data assembly is an incremental sequential one. So in fact, the contractor should not have a massive rush trying to put Kobe together at the end, because the architect is populated, the MEP is populated, the specialist suppliers populated, and all those aggregate into that. So I think that as an industry, that ownership and awareness will start generating. And my opinion would be that the manufacturer is one of the good places for that to be populated and take ownership. And then with the golden thread, have that traceable. So like the GS1 technology keeps a track and allows that. So we hopefully don't go through the tragedy of Grenfell Tower. That idea I really like.
Thank you. And another question here is sometimes it's tough to convince the clients to adopt new technologies. So some clients are fixed on their routine tasks. So just leading that on further, I guess, have we got any thoughts on how to convince the clients to accept this technology? And I guess given this topic, it's more around the asset managers or the building facility managers. Graham, I don't know if you want to have a go at that one.
Yeah, I think we work a lot of asset managers. I think it's just showing them some good case studies and some good examples of what is possible. Again, everything's possible, and again, this all costs money. Let's not kid ourselves. So I think it's just showing them this is what we could do. It's not going to get rid of your job, but allow you to do extra things. So if we can structure this data and actually provide all this data to you in day one, you will actually have seen this data 1 or 2, 3 years in advance of it actually being delivering, so you can actually start to do futurizing your like financial plans or something that's actually coming up. So again, it's just to show them some of the benefits there. But like everything, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it a drink. So again, it's just try to provide that support mechanisms. That's probably the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see here. Anand, what is the single biggest failure point from BIM to digital twin transition?
It goes back to good information management and data quality right through the process, because as I mentioned in my talk earlier, any amount of good data on top of bad data is going to result in just more bad data, right? So we're not going to fix bad data with putting good data on top. So if BIM is the foundation for creating good outcomes for the asset operations, the single biggest fail point is when there is no focus on data workflows in the BIM process. And I think Graham was also alluding to the same thing, the need to classify models, need to validate the data right through the process. So what is delivered through the BIM process is actually meaningful and consumable. And one other key factor is lack of planning. So if you don't establish the use cases that you really want to achieve in the end, if you don't start with the end in mind and just specify go, I need COBE data on everything, for example. That's like saying go boil the ocean, right? You're not going to get any outcome, any meaningful outcome. So starting with the end in mind, defining data requirements based on use cases so that somebody is going to consume it in the end, and making sure that the data that you do specify is properly validated. I would say those are the key requirements.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. And we're coming up to the very end of the session here. And I'd like to thank the three of you for very fine presentations. And I think if we were to summarize, I mean, Anand, you're very much use case driven, think about the end in mind, don't do things just for the sake of it. And Graham, it's all about that information management and making sure you've got good quality data that's that manages risk really well in terms of the data risk. And Pierre, it's around understanding again what are those points in the in-use phase where data can be the data will be extremely valuable to process and ways of caring and sharing. And if anybody wants to say anything else, now is anybody?
One final quote.
Good chat.
The one final quote is day one is a real number. And that's probably the big driver for asset management now, is that it all needs to consider day one on the basis of good, solid structure, like Anand said. That's it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you,
everyone.
ArcTalks and Ralph again for this wonderful opportunity. Great session. Thanks, Jen and Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.